Shada, welcome everyone to our class on the book of the Revelation. I'm going to open up with the usual affirmative prayer that I've been using lately in Aramaic, and we shall open it right now with that. Al haile de maran ishua mishicha misharenan milap milte de Maria lacha haya. All right, we're going to begin right away, and let me get my Bible. Before I begin actually with the third chapter of the book of the Revelation, there's something you need to know about this book. The early Jewish followers did not care for this particular book. And of course, they didn't have what we call the Bible like this right here. They had the whole Bible in their hand at one time. They only had scrolls, and their New Testaments, some early Jewish Christian groups only had one gospel, maybe Matthew. It depends on what group they were in and how the head man had any of those particular, we call them books, but they were scrolls, had these scrolls with the story of Jesus, that is his teachings. And then they had some epistles of Paul, some of them they did not have. They didn't have it all collected in one place called the New Testament. But it took until the 4th century before they accepted the book of the Revelation. And since it's called Revelation, which means this comes by inner sight. Okay, that's what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about before we continue with the Revelation, because we'll finish with the 3rd chapter today. And next week, we really begin heavily into symbols and into the 4th chapter, all the way almost to the finish of one thing after another after another. Okay. Where does all this occur? How does it occur? And where does it occur? Whoever this John was, whether it's the Apostle John, the original apostle of Jesus, that's debatable. I don't care what people believe, which John it was, but it was some John on the island of Patmos. And I was there on Patmos and went through the whole thing. It's supposed to be in the place where he wrote it in this particular scroll. But what I'm interested in is, how did the early followers of Jesus, the Jewish early followers of Jesus, interpret this book? They interpreted it in 2 ways. We know this from history. I'm not making this up. We know this from history. And that is, some of them took it that the symbols, none of it was taken literally. They all know it was symbols. But how do they interpret these symbols? And there was 2 ways. Some did it in the actual historical manner of interpreting it, which that's all that's done today practically with this book, is just strictly historical. What did it do historically? But they also interpreted it another way, and that was metaphysically. We use that word metaphysically. They didn't use it then. What they did was, how did they interpret it? Some interpreted in the sense of what was happening in the soul. It was an adventure in the soul. Now, what I mean by soul, I'm using the Aramaic word nausha and the Hebrew word nephesh, but we translate it as soul, which comes directly from Greek, which is psyche. The psyche is what we call the soul. But in Aramaic and in Hebrew, it has a little more sense to it. You can and it should be translated as being, B-E-I-N-G. So they interpreted not the first 3 chapters, but beginning with the 4th chapter, they began to interpret it, exegete it In other words, the exegesis, the interpretation of it was, what did it have to do with your being? That's your soul. We use the word soul. In fact, that's what we're in. Our trouble today is all over the world, not just in America, all over the world, we are suffering from the soul being damaged. We are no longer approaching things from heart and soul. That is, from being, from our essence, from our core. No longer. And that's why we're in trouble today. And I don't care what kind of trouble it is, it's because of that. Whether it's governmental, whether it's religious, whether it's physical, what it is, it's because we are losing contact with the soul, and the soul is being hurt. We talked about that last week, about the second death, this being injured by the second death, which is the injury. When you injure the soul, when you injure the mind, now you can, and it also means the consciousness of your being. It gets injured, it gets hurt. So when they saw these things, it's not with the physical eyes, it's within the mind. It's within the mind that they saw these different things. And all the language in the second and third chapters concerning the seven congregations or gatherings or assemblies, the word uses the word church, which means something that has been assembled and celebrated. They're celebrating the teachings of Jesus. So this was the really meaning of the word church. Church to us today means a building where people attend and go to church. But it means to party around and celebrate the teachings of Jesus and celebrate what he was about. And so we have done 4 of these churches. All right. What is the language of the soul? What is the language of the mind? What is the language of being, of our essence, of our core? What language do they use? English, Spanish, Italian, Aramaic, Hebrew? No. Their language is symbol. That's how the inner self communicates with us. Now, I know when they teach meditation, well, I really shouldn't get into that because I need to do that when we actually start the fourth chapter. Because there's 2 ways to meditate. Your mind going blank. And then the other, you take up the language of the soul. Not yakking. You take up the language of the soul, which is symbol. So when we're reading this book of the Revelation, we're reading the language of the soul, the language of being. This is why it's so mysterious. And then the symbols that are used are Near Eastern symbols. And if even today, if you were to go into Japan or China or these places where they teach, or in India, they will teach you the symbols of their particular traditions and of their particular religions. With us, it's the Christ, and that's what we're going to be dealing with when we start the 4th chapter. We're beginning with the first verse. Okay, let's go right now to where we left off. Chapter 3, we're dealing with the congregations. And I'll teach you more about what is the language of the soul when we start next week. All right. Chapter 3. To the messenger. Angel means messenger. The Jewish messenger, the Jewish one in charge of the congregation. He is responsible for that congregation. Not the congregation. He's to lead the congregation. He's the messenger. He's the angel to the congregation. So they depend on him for the heavenly message because he's an angel, a messenger from God to help guide the congregation. They were to be guided. And that's what they're meant. All these 7 to the 7 angels, the message was to basically basically to the Jewish messenger. And the apostles appointed certain heads over the congregation. So that's why they were called angels, and because of the responsibility. Now we've read 4 of them. This now is the 5th messenger in the city of Sardis. Now to the angel of the assembly in Sardis, write, these things says he who has the 7 spirits of God. The 7 spirits of God means the fullness of God's spirit, his light, the fullness of God's light, and the 7 stars. Well, you know who the 7 stars are. The 7 stars are the different heads of the assemblies. Okay. And he's now talking to this Jewish messenger who is responsible for the church in Sardis. I know your works. I know them. I've heard of them. We know them. And you have a name. Means you got quite a reputation. You're famous. You're famous. You got quite a name. Means you're famous. You got quite a reputation. That you are alive. It means vibrant. You're alive. You're something that's strong. You're prosperous. Sounds like a lot of congregations I know that are always after prosperity. And the messenger, all the messenger does is preach prosperity, 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 but they don't know what prosperity is. Okay. I know you have a name. This is why he says you have a name, you have a reputation, you are alive, you're prosperous, you're something and a half, but yet you are dead. I think that's so. And the word dead there means asleep. Asleep. Because they thought, they never referred to their people as just plain dead. They just said they are asleep, not dead. But they don't like to use the word dead. They just say they're asleep. So this is what this means here. You're known all over. You got a reputation. Oh, you're so alive, but really you're fast asleep. You're dead. How do I know it means fast asleep? Look at the next word. In verse 2, awake. Awake means wake up, wake up. And because you're in trouble. Hold fast to the things which remain. In other words, the things which you do have that are true, hold on to them. You're going to be losing that also. But are ready to die. It means lose everything. Everything's ready to go. Because you're too much into the material, you're too much into the physical, you're too much there. You're too much. Not that we need the physical, we need all that, but you're too much into it. You're asleep. You're not awake. And you're not awakening the souls in your congregation. You're asleep, they'll be asleep. And for I have found your works, not found your works mature. You keep them in a baby stage. They are not perfect there. Your works are not perfect. You're still dealing in such trivial things instead of what is really important. Remember, therefore, just as you have received and heard, so hold fast and turn to me. The word repent means turn to me. I will come against you as a thief. In other words, sneak up on you when you don't realize it. And you shall not know at what hour I will come upon you. That's what he means by a thief. You're going to be losing things. Come on, wake up. Start changing things, even though you're a prosperous leader. And he says, but you have a few members at Sardis who have not defiled their names. In other words, they have not disgraced their names. That's the word I would use there. you have some members that haven't fallen asleep. They haven't disgraced their names like you have done, the leader, like you have done. But he says, they have not disgraced their names, and they shall walk with me in white. I'm going to explain white in a minute. They shall walk with me in white because they are worthy. He who overcomes, remember I told you what that is, he who is conquering. He who is conquering. What? The same will be clothed in white robes. First he says, they will walk with me in white. Yeah, but I'm holding it because I'm going to explain that verse 4 and 5 together here. He says, he that is conquering, these same people will be clothed in white robes, and I will not blot. No, that's another something else. Okay, let's talk about whiteness. Whiteness means you return to your original state. White represents purity, represents originality. You go back to the very original. In other words, all colors come from a basic color. All things come from one thing. Okay. So what he's saying here is, walk in white means white has three significant things: originality, purity, and victory. Those three things: purity, originality, and victory. That's why when we get to the fourth chapter and the seal, and fourth and fifth chapter, when the seals are broken, the first thing that comes out, the first horseman, is white. The horse is white because he's going forth to conquer, and he's going to be victorious, as a warmonger. That's why it's in white. And he's going to conquer, seeks to conquer. So walking, in other words, to be clothed in white means you're conquering, you're victorious, and you're getting to your original state of being. That's what it means, walk with me in white, because Jesus had established his original being. He manifested it when he was with his apostles. And I'm speaking in a colorful language here, but Jesus didn't use this kind of language. This is the language of the revelation of symbols. So, in other words, Jesus was already in white when he was teaching his fishermen, when he was with them, healing, teaching them about the kingdom of heaven, giving them stories and parables and all that. And he was already in white. And then when he went through his death, and he was crucified and he died, but he still showed himself afterwards, revealed himself. He was totally in white. So walk with me in white means to return to your original state, to be victorious, to have purity. That's why in white, if you notice in Islam, when they're always celebrating the Kaaba, they walk around the Kaaba and they're all dressed in white, all in white. And angels always are in white. And the priests are wearing a full white covering. That's their basic clothes, is all white. So that's the meaning of that here. So then he said, you'll clothe you in white robes. You'll be victorious, pure, and you'll have your original state. I will not blot his name out of the book of life. This is all figurative Near Eastern speech, because in the Near East, your great potentates, those in power, those in authority, kept books of people who are of great, that didn't disgrace their reputation, that didn't disgrace, they did meritorious deeds, and they put them in a book. But if they did disgrace it, then they blot them out. They take them out of the book. And what he was saying here is, I will not blot his name out of the book, meaning keep your white garment. Stay victorious, stay original, stay in that state. This is what he's telling some of the members of the congregation that did not defile their names. In other words, disgrace their names. They were conquering. And I will not take him out of the book of life, but I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels, because that's what they did in the Near East. People of what we do is we put medals on people, and we see that every once in a while. People of outstanding performances. They have done well. They've done well for the states. They've done well for all this, and they get confessed. They get confessed before the people on TV and all that. Now here in the ancient world, and he's speaking of the spiritual world here, you are making a name for yourself in the heavenly sphere. Everything is good, everything is white, everything is victorious. And this is all figurative, symbolic speech, just as they do in the physical world. And they're using physical terminology. They're using figurative speech of the Near East. So that's what it's saying here. Your name will be blotted out. Your name will be confessed. It'll be shouted all over heaven. Again, which is just figurative, meaning you have really conquered. Okay, and before my Father and before angels, before everyone there. Okay. He who has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Now to the church of Philadelphia. Right. These things says he who has the key. I want to go through this fast because I want to finish this last chapter because I want to start 4 next week. He's writing to the church in Philadelphia, in Turkey. Right. These things says he who is the Holy One, that is totally set apart from everything else the Holy One. He who is true, that's what gives him his holiness. And who has the key, the authority of David, which means the true kingdom of David, the spiritual kingdom. That's why it says kingdom of David. The key of David means the authority of David. He says, I have overcome and I have won this key. He who opens and no man shuts, and shuts and no man opens. In other words, this is spiritual authority. Man cannot do it. He cannot shut it, and he cannot open it, and he cannot open it, and he cannot shut it. That's what he's saying here. He says, I'm the one who has that key. Again, he says to the leader in Philadelphia, I know your works, and look, I have set before you an open door. An open door means an opportunity. If you ever see a vision of an open door or things open, that always means an opportunity, which no man can lock. It's a spiritual opportunity, which no man can lock, for you have but little strength. He's really praising this particular leader. You have but little strength, and yet you have obeyed my teachings. The word there means my teachings, and have not denied my name. You have not given it up for other teachings. Look, I turn over those of the synagogue. I turn over means I stop them. Those of the synagogue of Satan, those who are trying to hurt you as a leader, those who are trying to hurt the congregation, putting a stop to them. They won't succeed. And he says, who says that they are Jews, but are not, because you are the true Jews because you found the Messiah. And they want to hurt you. If they were true Jews, they wouldn't want to hurt you. Plain and simple. That's what he's saying here. And he says, and I will make them come and worship before your feet. That again is figurative speech. No one came and bowed before their feet. This is a way of speaking, which means they will recognize you even though they are fighting you right now. That's what it means when it says that they will come and bow at your feet, before your feet. and to know that I have loved you, referring to God, because you have kept the word of my patience, the teachings and being patient, even though you were persecuted. I will also keep you from the hour of temptation when you go through a trial. That word temptation there means trial. When you are in trial, which shall come upon all the world to try those who live on the land or the earth. Look, I come quickly. Hold fast to that which you have, that no one take your crown, your glory, you hold. Don't let anyone take that from you. Even though I know you have little strength, I'm strengthening you now. And your patience is great. Be careful that they don't take your crown. He who is conquering, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. To become a pillar in the temple of God means to become a supporter of the truth. I will so strengthen you that you're going to become like a pillar in the temple, because the pillars hold up the temple. And this is, again, a figure of speech, which means because you're holding so fast and you're conquering, you're going to become a true supporter, a true pillar in the teachings of Jesus. That's what it's talking about, which is the temple. It's a figure of speech. And it says, you'll be a temple of my God, and he shall not go out again. You will be in that structure of spirit. You'll be in that, and you'll know it in here. So he says, and I will write upon him the name of my God and the name of the new Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven. It's telling us something that's going to happen in the last chapters. The heavenly Jerusalem, the heavenly God, and which comes down out of heaven from my God, and I will write upon him my new name. In the temple, in these temples on the pillars, they sometimes put the name of the God on the pillars of the temple. But a new name means, again, since you have become such a strong pillar, and the name of my God will be written on that pillar, because you're such a support, you are expressing the Godhead, you are holding everything up, your nature changes, everything changes, because you don't see things the way most people see them. You've gone beyond that. You have a new name. He who hears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the congregation, or to the assembly. Now the last one. And to the messenger of the church in Laodicea. He's after the leader. He always approaches the leader first. These things says Amen, meaning the one who begins and the one who ends it. The faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. I know your works. I know your leadership. I know all about it. And that you are neither hot nor cold. It is better to be either cold or hot. In other words, you're lukewarm. You don't have the fire you once had. You're not exactly cold, but you're no longer hot. You no longer have that zeal anymore. You're like lukewarm water. That's why it says, so that you are like lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spew you out of my mouth. Again, Near Eastern figurative speech. No one in the Near East, no one likes lukewarm water. It's either hot or cold water. And they, when it's lukewarm, they just spew it out, just spit it out. They don't like it. So and he's just using this illustration, meaning, come on, you're no longer cold or hot. And you know what's going to happen? You're going to lose out completely. God doesn't spew anyone out of his mouth. First of all, we're not in the mouth of God. This is just figurative speech. God doesn't do that. It means your own condition will put you out. It's just another way of speaking. And he says, you say, referring to this leader, you say, I am rich and my wealth has increased. He's really prospering and I need nothing. And you do not know that you are miserable and a wanderer and poor and blind and naked. This is what he's saying here. You're poor and blind and naked and don't even realize it. He says, I advise of you to buy of me gold refined in the fire. It means gold that has been purified. Get the truth now. Get purified truth. That's why he says, come on now, get out of this lukewarm state. Get out of this miserable state. And I'll give you something different. He says, we'll bargain for it. He's just speaking just like, buy of me gold tried in the fire, purified truth, that you may become rich. The true witness of your being, the true richness of your heart, the true richness of your soul. And white raiment, I already told you what white raiment is, so that you get that originality, that purity. That's why it's pure gold, refined gold. All impurities are taken out. He says that you may be clothed, so that you may be clothed, and the shame of your nakedness may not be seen. Anoint your eyes. In other words, begin to see spiritually. Anoint your eyes. They used to use a little eye anointment for clarity of sight. So that's what he was saying here. Anoint your eyes. In other words, start seeing clearly. Start seeing clearly. With salve that you may see. I rebuke. Now, even though I was talking to you like this and you're not hot or cold, and even though I was very strong, talking about spewing you out of my mouth, I rebuke and chastise all those whom I love. I know maybe you don't like this message, but I'm doing it because I love you. I have to, because I don't want you to lose out. Be zealous, see? Be zealous, be hot. Therefore, and turn to me. Stop doing this other. Quit being lukewarm, even though you're rich and all this other stuff. Look, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear, or if anyone, I like anyone, if anyone, and that's how it's written in Aramaic too. I can also translate it as man. If anyone hear my voice and open the door, the voice there means the sound of knocking, because knocking, people knock in different ways in the Near East. If it's a friend, they knock a certain way. If it's a beggar, he knocks very slowly, which means someone with a need is there. They have different type of knocks. This is why it says, you know my voice, know what time of knocking, and open the door. It is I, the one who loves you. And he says, I stand at the door and open the door, and I will come in and to him and will sup with him and he with me. To sup with him means to eat of his teachings, because you need to do that for your soul to have that white garment, for your soul to have that refined gold in the fire. He says, sup with me, which means eat of my teachings. Eat my teachings. Eat it. Make it where it fully gets into your system, into your being. Just like how food nourishes the body, certain teachings that are pure and refined, that have been in the fire. The truth and Jesus' teachings have been in the fire. They still are in the fire too, because it's the only truth. It will nourish your soul. Nourish your soul. To him who is conquering, I will grant to sit with me on my throne. Okay, to sit with him on his throne means, okay, again, figurative speech of the Near Eastern potentates. Near Eastern potentates they only have one seat that the Near Eastern potentate sits in. But to sit with me in my throne means you sit on the same level as I am. That's what it means. Not sit in the same exact seat, but on the throne level. And this is why it says Jesus is standing at the right hand of God. It means he's on the throne with God, standing at the right hand of God. That's an expression used in the Gospels. And sometimes it's sitting at the right hand. You will see the Son of Man coming at the right hand of God, which means God and Jesus are sharing the same authority and throne. To share the throne means to share the authority. You know, people are thinking that, oh, I'm going to overcome and I'm going to sit on the throne with God. No, God doesn't have a throne he's sitting on. This is just figurative speech. So to sit on the throne with God or with Jesus means you share the same authority. This is what it means in the Gospel of John, the first chapter, where in the first chapter, in those first 18 verses, where he says, when he's speaking to those, he says, as many as received him, in other words, received Jesus, that is, accepted his teachings, gave he the right, the authority to be sons of God. In other words, to be a son of God like I am a son of God. That's what Jesus was, that's what John was saying there by using that. As many as received or accepted the teachings of Jesus will what? Will he grant the same authority that he had to be sons of God like Jesus. Notice what I said, like Jesus. Okay, I'm going to make a difference between Jesus and the Christ. I'm going to do more of that when we get into the next chapter. So when it says he will sit with me on my throne means share the authority. Got it? There's no place for you to sit up there. But in the Near East, people of high meritorious rank, the potentate will have them have another seat right there. And everyone will admire because that man is that, because you're not allowed to even see the king. You have to go with your head bowed until they say you can raise your head and look upon the face of the high potentate. But then to share that throne means to share that authority. You see, when you know the Eastern background, these verses, scriptures come alive. You understand it. You see it. You understand it. This is not our language. We don't have this today. What throne are we going to sit on? Come on. I'm talking about physically. We don't have this in our culture. You have to go back to the ancient Near East. Even as I conquered and have sat down with my father, then I explained that already. Sat down with my father on his throne. He didn't say, move over, Dad, I'm going to sit on the same seat you are. No, it meant at his right hand. He who hears, let him hear what, or may he hear. Yes, may he hear. Yes, may you hear the messages to the messenger and to the churches. See, in the end, in the beginning, it's to the messenger and a little bit to some of the congregation, some of the people in the congregation. But in the very end, he addresses all the congregations that you may hear. He who is conquering may hear, and all these wonderful things will happen for you. He who has ears, anyone who has ears, may he hear what the Ruach, the Spirit, says to the churches. Powerful, powerful. Now, We will start with chapter 4 next week. Now, I'm going to ask you for your questions. They don't necessarily, I have some from last week that were asked that I never got to, and Reverend Hanny sent them to me. So I'm going to get to those first. But if you have any questions, write it in there and on the chat, and I will answer them. Okay. Let me put this down. This is what was sent in by Reverend Hanny that some of those that I didn't get to. What is the metaphysical meaning in Aramaic behind the term Mashiach? Okay, that's important. That's what we call the word Christ. That's what we call the word Christ, Mashiach. That's from Greek. Greek is Christ. And Mashiach, we also can say Messiah. But again, we're not getting the meaning. It means the word Mashiach comes from Mashach, which means to anoint, an anointed one, an anointed one. And it's a meaning as applied in John and Revelation. Yes, that's what I'm going to be doing. Are they the same idea in both scriptures? Yes. Jesus was the Mashiach. Jesus was the Messiah. I'm talking about Jesus now, the man Jesus, the physical man. He was the Messiah, the anointed one, the one they'd been waiting for. But he didn't come the way they thought he would come. They thought he would come like a warrior. And still people think that Jesus, when he's going to come back, has got to be the same way. Can't. If he's going to be different and have to use warfare and kill people and shove them in some sort of place where he's going to burn them forever and ever, then everything he taught us in the beginning in the Gospels is all false. If you believe that Jesus isn't going to come to kill us and to kill those who don't believe. No way. And to start a war. No. Again, it's because they don't understand the spiritual message there. Okay. So the term Christ means the anointed one. Now, in the gospel, that was Jesus. When we read it in the Revelation, this is what I was going to start with next Wednesday. When we read in the book of the Revelation, the term Christ doesn't mean Jesus. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Let's go back. I'm going to take you now to where I was going to start it with next Wednesday, because I've got to answer this question here, because he says, does it mean the same thing? Yes, it does, and no, it doesn't. Let me explain that. All right. I'm going to go to the first chapter of Revelation, beginning with the 10th verse of the first chapter. Because in order to understand from the 4th chapter all the way to the very end of the book of the Revelation, you need to understand these verses that I'm going to read now again. And I'm going to explain to you the Christ. Okay. The spirit of prophecy came upon me on the Lord's day. And I heard behind me a great voice as a trumpet, an announcement. What you see, write in a book, in a scroll, and send it to the 7 assemblies, to Ephesus, Smyrna. We already did that. I turned to see the voice that spoke to me. And as I turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks, which were the 7 assemblies. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, okay, it's verse 13 that begins the Christhood. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, not the menorah, not the 7 menorahs that were there. He says, in the middle of it, in the center, where all probably in a circle, all the 7 menorahs. And in the center is where we're going to talk about the Christ. Okay, he says, one resembling, Dr. Lamsa translates it, Son of Man. One resembling a human being. That's what Son of Man means. In other words, the appearance of a being appeared in the middle of these 7 menorahs. Okay? And He wants you to know it wasn't some odd looking creatures. I think it was a human being. It was a human being. And this human being was wearing a long vestment. That's why it says long vestment means from here all the way down to the feet. And wearing a long vestment and girded round about his breast. Now, the long vestment was the white robe of the priest. Not a robe, but it was the raiment, just a long white vestment. White. That's what the priest had. And girded round about his chest was the golden girdle. Okay. The golden girdle, it means it's holding things together, holding everything together. And around the chest and around the waist, which means it brought the whole white vestment was brought in by a belt around the waist and across the chest. And it was golden, which represents royalty and loyalty. Royalty and loyalty. This is a different picture of the Messiah, of the Mashiach, the anointed one. And it says, and his head and his hair were white as wool. White as wool, not look like wool. White as it's describing the color white, not the shape of the wool, not the shape of the wool at all. It's the color white. People don't even know how to read that. And white as snow, white as wool and white as snow. It's to emphasize how white it was. So very white. And his eyes were a flame of fire. And his feet were like, look at all these symbolism. His feet were like the fine brass of Lebanon, and as it burned in the furnace. His voice was the sound of many waters running. And he had his right hand, then it goes into what he had. And he says, but out of his mouth, forget what he had in his hand, but what he had in his mouth is a sharp two-edged sword. And coming out of his mouth. And his face, his entire countenance. I don't know how in the world he saw the white long vestment and the white hair, because his entire countenance was like the sun. Brilliant light, just absolutely brilliant light. And shining in its strength. If it's shining in its strength, you can't look at it. And when I saw him, okay, that's where I'm going to stop. Now here, the anointed mind is described. The anointed being is described. Jesus fulfilled it, but Jesus never looked like this. We're talking about now the Christhood. What does the Christhood look like? What do you see as the Christhood? What as the Mashiach, as the anointed one? Okay, this is enough. First of all, it's a human being. So we know this anointing is for a human being. All right, follow me now, because this is what I was going to start with for next week, but I'm doing it now to answer this question here, because I want to show you the difference between Jesus being Messiah and what it means here in Revelation. What we're talking about here is an anointed human being, and an anointed human being has these characteristics. We can use the term anointed consciousness. What does an anointed consciousness have? First of all, you're required to be human. This is for human beings. It's not for animals. It's not for anything else. Not for angels. It's for a human being. In other words, this is what your true Christianity is. True Christianity is to give you a Christ consciousness. A Christ consciousness. And I'm using Greek. A Mashiach, an anointed mind, a brilliant, bright, anointed mind, but you're required to be human. So it has to do with the consciousness that's in the human, because human a human being is the only being on this earth that straddles heaven and earth, right in between. Animals don't, even though we feel wonderful things from them, they don't have the complete compartment. They have sensitivity, they have all that, but their consciousness is not the same consciousness that we have. Our consciousness is full blown, except for the spiritual, because we have the ego involved, we have the I involved, that gets engulfed with materialism, with all other kinds of things. And that's why we go blind. And that's why government goes blind. That's why leaders go blind. That's why church leaders go blind. That's why people in all kinds of things go blind, because they don't feed the soul. When they go to church, all they hear is doctrine, dogma. They're not taught how to awaken their souls, and where their souls are alive, not to a doctrine, but to the absolute efficacy of the living God and the living Christ. Okay? All right. It becomes a form. It becomes, oh, you sit there and you hear the message, oh yeah, and this will help you, get more money in your pocket, or help you beautify the building, or help you do this, or help you do that. They miss it. They're not getting to the soul. They're not getting into the soul. The only time there's any sense of soul is when they're singing from their heart. Otherwise, forget it. So here it says, what is in this Christ consciousness? What does a Christ consciousness have? What is an anointed mind? And by mind, I don't mean the intellect. I'm talking about the intelligence. The intelligence, an anointed intelligence. You want to be intelligent? You need that anointing. You need that light. So he says he looked. That's why he's in the midst of the menorah, in the midst of the light, and in the midst of the stars. Okay. All light, 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 light. Stars are light, menorahs are light. Okay. So then he says, and he's wearing a long vestment, which was priesthood. I already read that to you. It means you are your own priest. You are your own priest. That's it, period. And your consciousness, in your consciousness. And you are of royalty. You are of David. You are of David, even though you may not be Jewish. You are of David. David was of the tribe of Judah. But it means you take on loyalty and royalty. In your consciousness, this is spiritual consciousness, not outward physical. His head was white as wool, white, which means experienced, aged, experienced wisdom. White hair means wisdom and experience. It's a combination of wisdom and experience. This is a Christ consciousness. And that's why we have to feed the soul. Feeding the soul gives you that Christ consciousness. Again, I'm using the Greek, which is the anointed consciousness. What is consciousness? Well, I keep using the word consciousness. What is that? It means awareness, anointed awareness, enlightened awareness. What is enlightened awareness? Great experience, great wisdom. You understand what you are, where your true being is, what all of that is. This is what a Christ consciousness is, and that's what it means here in these verses. So the anointed awareness has experience and has wisdom. Then it says, and his eyes were like a flame of fire. Can you visualize this? Eyes like a flame of fire? That means great insight and conviction. Great insight and conviction. An anointed awareness has conviction and insight. And the feet, in other words, you need feet and the legs. That word there, feet, also means legs. Legs and feet, like the fine brass of Lebanon. When your consciousness is this strong, you'll be able to stand and walk and trample on things that are not true. It doesn't mean you reject people. You just trample on the lies. That's the difference. And sound of many waters. It's a universal understanding. Many waters coming from God, all these different waters. And isn't that the truth? It's in all religions. There's this waters, and it's the sound of many waters. You understand all then the depth of all the other religions, not the outward traditional things, but you understand the depth of it. This is an anointed awareness. And out of your mouth, because your consciousness, your awareness is clear, out of your mouth comes this sharp two-edged sword. Truth, which cuts away, up and down, two-edged. And then ends up with, in the very end, you have your full being like the strength of the sun. Okay, that explains that question that I was asked here. All right, next one. Is John using historical situations to make metaphysical commentaries on the human being? No. I actually answered that question when I started out today. That's why I started right away recording right from the beginning. And I explained that, how they interpret it two ways in the Near East. And so it means also, they expressed it as what the inner meaning of being, what happens to it, okay? But they also can do it historically. Now, the next question, this next question requires me teaching you about Jesus. This next question is a humdinger. It says, did Jesus ever marry? Please, when I start the Aramaic School of Light, I will answer that question and go into detail for you on that. Did Jesus ever marry? I could do it very simply, but I would like to explain the background on it, okay? And, just saying yes or no, I want to go into it because as far as I know, I think I will start the Aramaic School of Light either in September or October, which is once a month. And I will go, I believe I'm going to go into Jesus himself. I'm going to go into his childhood. I'm going to go into how did Jesus learn that he was a child of God? How did he learn that? How did he know he was the Son of God? How did he come into all of this? I'm going to go into all of that for you, okay? And it's there in the scriptures, but it's hidden. You don't see it because people read over it too superficially, and they don't see it there, but it's there. And I think that's what Spirit's leading me to do, to go into the man Jesus. And that's what we see so much of his divinity, but what about his man? How did this man, M-A-N, human being, come into the divinity? How did he realize it? When did he realize it? That will be for the Aramaic School of Light when I go into Ishwa, the Son of the Near East and the Son of God. That's the difference. Son of the Near East and the Son of God. So, all right. Do you have any questions there, Hani? Oh, I see some here.
I don't on my
I can't
slide.
hear you. Let me put it up loud.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
You don't have any? Okay.
Nothing for me.
Or Dr. Errico, your question. Oh, it's already done. Here's one. What is the affirmation prayer which you open? Would you please provide the words and translation? Thank you. Okay. What I opened with, this is an ancient opening. They even do it in Islam, except they don't use Christ. They do it in all the books, everything you open. And if you're going to learn a language, in the Aramaic language, they always open with Al Haile the Maran Ishuam Shihra, which is with or upon the energy and power of our Lord Jesus, the Anointed. And then you go on to what then you have to put in there what we're going to do. What I did, for instance, if you're writing a book, when they did the New Testament. Yeah, I'll show you. It's right here. If you have this right here, if you want to see what the Aramaic words look like, if you go to my Aramaic Light on the Gospel of Matthew, and right there where it says Aramaic Light on the Gospel of Matthew, and then over here you see the manuscript of Matthew. Okay, the first line, the very first line is not scripture. They took it out in our Bibles, but it's there in the manuscript. It says, Al Haile, the modern Ishwa Mishicha, Misharenan. That's the next one. We begin. No, there was no we. It was the scribe who put this in there. He, instead of saying I begin, he says we begin, because he's including those who are going to read what he's going to do. He says, Al Haile, the modern Ishwa Mishicha, Misharenan. We begin to write the book of the New Testament, Evangelion Kadisha, the holy gospel of the Mashiach, of our Lord Jesus, the Mashiach. It's right there. All this, I don't know if you can see it. All this right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you have my book, you can see it. The first 4 lines, it's the same thing I say, only I don't say we begin to write. I say we begin to learn. We begin to study. It means to learn, to study. Malep is what I say. The word of the living God. That's what I say in English. Okay, so it's I'm just and if I have a dictionary here too. Look, this is the dictionary, Aramaic to English. Payne Smith. And when you open it, right there, right on the top, there's that same statement right here. Only the Payne Smith, the one who did it, just didn't know the full Aramaic way of doing it. She says, in the power and energy, instead of al. Al is more the ancient way to put it. She says, B'haile, the modern issue Mashiach. Isn't that what I say? But I say al haile. Al haile. She says bihaile, in, with, by, or also means by the energy or power of our Lord Jesus Christ. I begin. She says, I begin, because she's the one who redid her father's dictionary, which is huge, big. And this is a short form of it, which you can get. So that's what I'm doing. It's the ancient way of presenting something. Okay. And let's see if there's another one. To translate it in English for you, I just gave it to you. Is this a simple message from whatever John? Is this a simple message from whatever John to the different congregations? Yes, it is. As a sort of communication, not particularly. Yes, he's using figurative speech and mystical because he had this revelation. But as a message that is circular, and what was his authority to address. And what was his authority to address? Because he had this vision, and the vision told him to contact these churches, because there were many other churches, but he had to go after these 7 in Asia Minor because they were popular at that time. Okay, so you don't have any other questions, Hani?
Well, one came about the new images from NASA, but I'm also looking at the time, Rabbi.
You say you don't, or you do?
No, I have a comment about wondering if you saw the amazing new telescopic pictures of the universe.
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, yeah. Well, I'll share that with you, and then maybe the question as well next time, because we are at 8:04 right now.
Okay, it's time to stop. All right, everyone. It's a pleasure being with you this evening, and bless you. I love you, and I'll see you next Wednesday.
Thank you, Rabbi.